In the past, we have looked at good horror remakes, bad horror remakes, and even movies that deserve to be remade. Well, today we are back in the remake realm of horror to look at some classics, some really unique films that still stand the test of time. So join me as we rank the top 5 horror movies that should never be remade on this episode of Ranking Rumble. Welcome back to WWH. My name is Andrew Dreamer. As I said, today we're looking at some horror movies that, in my opinion, should never be remade in any capacity. We all have movies that we hold dear to our heart, and a lot of times those are the movies that we probably don't want to see be changed, or maybe just take the risk of there being a version of the story that feels less than. Film in general is very subjective, and this is no different. Maybe even more so than other topics because people really love to defend their favorite movies. That being said, I believe discussion is good. We need more discussion in this crazy, messy world that we live in. So let's do that. Let's have conversations about these movies and any other movies that may fit in this category. I look forward to seeing all of your comments telling me which horror movies you think are too special or maybe just too good to be remade. Maybe your perspective is different than mine. There's nothing wrong with that, so go ahead and leave me a list of movies that you would include in this ranking. Maybe I'll gain some new insight, and honestly, that's something that I'm always looking for. Before we dive in though, be sure to body slam that subscribe button and drop kick that like button as hard as you possibly can so you never miss any of the hard hitting, chill inducing 5-star matches we have here at WWH. Alright, it is bell time now, so grab your popcorn and make your way to your seat. Let's head down to the ring. Starting us off at number 5 is Psycho from 1960. Before I go any farther with this one, I'm just going to go ahead and get this out of the way. I know this movie has been remade by Gus Van Sant, and there was also the Bates Motel TV show. Let's address the remake first. You can't really call the remake a bad movie because it's essentially the same movie. There's very little difference between the two films. If anything, I think this remake proves my point that this movie shouldn't be remade. There was no point to it. As for Bates Motel, I did enjoy the show, but I don't really consider it to be a remake. I consider it to be more of a prequel than anything else, even though that it does kind of get into that story of the original film as well towards the end of the show. I mean, that's just how I see it. Maybe I'm alone in that, but whatever. To me, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho still holds up even today because of the storytelling. There's no way that it can be replicated or improved upon in my opinion. And to be honest, a huge part of why this movie was so successful is due to the twists. Killing off what the audience believes to be the main character halfway through, then the revelation that Norman has been the killer the whole time. Both of those twists were executed amazingly well, and any remake would suffer because, 1, everyone would expect it, or 2, because people would be looking for the complete opposite. I don't think you can win either way in this situation. It would be divisive and disappointing regardless of the direction that they choose to take the story. Personally, I just don't see it working out very well. Beyond that, there's a certain charm to the original film that can't be replicated either. The decision to shoot in black and white, that wouldn't happen today. The mysterious and tense atmosphere is something that Hitchcock has excelled at, and I'm not sure that anyone can live up to that. Even Gus Van Sant, who is a great filmmaker in his own right, could not do what Hitchcock did in terms of atmosphere. And lastly, Anthony Perkins brought something so special to his role as Norman. He was truly the perfect choice. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone that I would want to see in that role. Freddie Highmore was great in the TV show, don't get me wrong, but even that character felt different than what I'm personally looking for in a Psycho project. Again, it's very subjective, but that's how I feel. Coming in at number 4 is Alien from 1979. Directed by Ridley Scott, Alien is widely regarded as one of the greatest science fiction horror films ever made. Set aboard the Nostromo, the film follows a crew of working class space truckers who respond to a mysterious distress signal from a nearby moon. Their routine investigation it quickly turns into a nightmare when the alien infiltrates their ship. As we all know, the story centers on Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, who ultimately becomes the crew's last hope for survival against the terrifying creature. Part of what makes Alien so effective is its slow building tension and that atmosphere. Rather than relying on constant action, the film focuses on dread, isolation, and the fear of the unknown. The Nostromo itself feels dirty, cramped, and mechanical, which adds to the sense of realism. The alien design by H.R. Geiger is another reason that the film remains iconic. The biomechanical appearance of the xenomorph is both disturbing and fascinating, making it one of the most recognizable monsters in cinema history. Combined with the film's eerie sound design and shadowy cinematography, Alien created a completely new type of science fiction horror experience. One of the reasons Alien should never be remade is that its success came from a perfect combination of timing, creativity, and originality that would nearly be impossible to replicate now. In 1979, the audiences had never seen anything quite like it. The infamous chestburster scene was shocking because it was unexpected and it was brutally realistic. Another reason a remake would likely fail is that Alien already feels timeless. The practical effects, detailed set design, and restrained storytelling give the movie a gritty authenticity that modern CGI-heavy remakes often struggle to match. Today's filmmaking trends often prioritize spectacle over atmosphere, but Alien thrives on that quiet tension and the psychological fear. A remake would almost certainly feel pressured to update the film with bigger action scenes or a faster pace, which would undermine the slow, suffocating horror that made the original so powerful. Some films can benefit from reinterpretation, but Alien is one of those rare cases where the original is already definitive. Trying to remake it would not improve upon the classic. It would only invite comparisons that I think are pointless. Next up at number 3, we have The Thing from 1982. Directed by the legendary John Carpenter, The Thing is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Now, I know this is technically a remake of The Thing from Another World, but to me, this is the best and most well-known version. Set in an isolated Antarctic research station, the story follows a group of American scientists who encounter a mysterious organism capable of perfectly imitating any life form. As paranoia spreads through the camp, the men realize that anyone among them could secretly be that creature. The film centers on helicopter pilot R.J. MacReady, played by Kurt Russell, who becomes that reluctant leader trying to uncover the creature before it escapes the frozen wasteland and reaches civilization. What makes The Thing so powerful is its relentless atmosphere of distrust and that isolation again. The Antarctic setting creates a sense of hopelessness as well. The characters are trapped in a frozen desert with no way to escape and no way to know who they can trust. Every conversation feels tense because the creature could be hiding inside any one of them. This constant psychological pressure turns the film into a terrifying mystery as much as a monster movie. The story gradually escalates from subtle suspicion to full-blown chaos as the men begin testing each other and questioning their own survival. Another major reason the film remains legendary is its groundbreaking practical effects created by special effects artist Rob Bottin. The transformations of the alien creature are grotesque, they're unpredictable, and they're shockingly creative. Instead of simply being a single monster, the alien constantly mutates into disturbing new forms, sprouting limbs, stretching faces, and reshaping bodies in ways that still look horrifying decades later. These effects were created with animatronics, prosthetics, and practical makeup rather than digital effects, which gives the horror a physical realism that many modern films struggle to replicate. Because of all of these elements working together, The Thing is a film that should never be remade. Its impact comes from a perfect storm of practical craftsmanship, suspenseful storytelling, and the raw performances of its cast. The practical effects are especially important. They give the creature weight and presence that CGI often lacks. A modern remake would almost certainly rely heavily on digital effects, kind of like what we saw with that 2011 prequel.
Way to go, a-hole!
There is also the matter of the film's unique tone and ambiguity. The ending of The Thing is famously unresolved, leaving us all questioning who, if anyone, has survived or whether the creature is still hiding among the two men. That kind of bold, uncertain ending it's rare in modern filmmaking, which often prefers clearer conclusions. The original film's willingness to leave audiences unsettled is part of why it has endured over the decades. Most importantly, The Thing has already become the definitive version of this story. Carpenter's film perfected the concept in a way that feels complete. Rather than trying to remake it, filmmakers are better off creating new stories inspired by its ideas. Some films reach a level where they stand as untouchable pieces of genre history, and The Thing is unquestionably one of them. Our number 2 entrant is Phantasm from 1979. Written and directed by Don Coscarelli, the film blends science fiction, supernatural horror, and dreamlike storytelling into something that feels completely unique. The story follows Mike, a young boy who begins to suspect that the mysterious mortician known as the Tall Man is involved in something far more sinister than simply burying the dead. As Mike and his older brother Jody investigate the strange happenings at a local mausoleum, they uncover a bizarre world filled with other dimensions, reanimated corpses, and the film's most iconic weapon, the deadly flying silver spheres. One of the reasons that Phantasm stands out is its surreal atmosphere. Rather than following a conventional horror structure, the movie often feels like a nightmare unfolding on the screen. Combined with its low-budget creativity and inventive effects, the film manages to feel bigger and stranger than many studio horror films of the time. At the center of the movie's terror is the Tall Man, played memorably by Angus Scrimm. His towering presence, slow movements, and his booming voice make him one of the most distinctive villains in horror history. The character isn't just frightening because of what he does, but because of how mysterious he remains throughout the story. Even as the film reveals pieces of his sinister plan, shrinking corpses into slave creatures and transporting them into another dimension, there is always that unsettling sense that the audience is only seeing part of a much larger nightmare. Phantasm is also a product of a very specific time and creative vision, which is exactly why it should never be remade. The film's strange pacing, experimental storytelling, and low-budget charm are all tied directly to Coscarelli's independent filmmaking approach. A modern remake would likely try to explain every mystery, polish the rough edges, and rely heavily on CGI, stripping away the eerie ambiguity that makes the original so compelling. What makes the Phantasm special is that it feels raw and unpredictable and personal. More importantly, the film has already carved out its own place in horror history. Its influence can be seen in many later films that blend surreal imagery with psychological horror, and it spawned a cult following that has remained passionate for decades. Attempting to remake Phantasm would risk turning a uniquely strange and imaginative cult classic into something far more ordinary. Our final entrant today in this rumble is Jaws from 1975. Directed by Steven Spielberg and based on the novel by Peter Benchley, the film tells the story of a small beach town terrorized by a massive great white shark. When a series of brutal shark attacks begins to threaten the community of Amity Island, Police Chief Martin Brody must team up with a marine biologist and a hardened shark hunter to stop the deadly predator before more lives are lost. What begins as a simple premise quickly becomes an intense and suspenseful battle between man and nature. The film's success comes largely from its masterful suspense and unforgettable characters. Roy Scheider plays Chief Brody, the reluctant hero who must overcome his fear of the ocean in order to protect the town. He is joined by oceanographer Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and the grizzled shark hunter Quint, portrayed by Robert Shaw. The chemistry between these three characters, especially during the tense and often humorous moments aboard Quint's boat, helps elevate the film beyond a simple monster movie. Their interactions bring humanity and personality to the story, making the stakes feel real and personal. Another key reason Jaws became such a classic is its brilliant use of tension. Because the mechanical shark used during filming frequently malfunctioned, Spielberg was forced to keep the creature off screen for much of the movie. This limitation ultimately worked in the film's favor, allowing the suspense to build through suggestion rather than constant visual spectacle. The ominous theme composed by John Williams also helped make the unseen shark feel more threatening. Jaws should never be remade because the magic of the original film comes from the exact conditions under which it was created. Its suspense relies on practical effects, careful direction, and the performances of its cast rather than flashy modern technology. A remake would almost certainly rely heavily on the CGI sharks and faster pacing, which would likely remove that slow building tension that made the original so effective. Beyond that, Jaws already defined the modern summer blockbuster. Its massive success changed how movies were marketed and released, and its influence can still be felt today. Trying to remake it would not only be unnecessary, but it would risk diminishing the legacy of a film that is already considered a masterpiece. It's also the reason why, to this day, I will not go in the ocean. But there you have it. Those are my top 5 horror movies that should never be remade. I'm curious what you think. Did I leave any out, or do you disagree with anything I said? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, I look forward to any discussions we can have here. I genuinely love talking about these movies and getting new perspective any chance I get. Now that we've talked about some horror movies that shouldn't be remade, what are the worst horror movie remakes? Luckily, you can find out by watching the video that's appearing on your screen now. And remember, in the squared circle of horror, there are no countouts for nightmares. My name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.